Hello, my name is Christie Chiles Twillie, and I am the author of Homeland 24. I didn't originally plan to write a story. The idea for Homeland was actually born out of several concerns that I had about what was being presented on the stage in theater and also what we see on the screen. So in 2016, as things were beginning to heat up politically in this country, one of the things that I realized was we rarely in movies or plays ever see women, actors of color, actors from the LGBTQ A plus community ever being represented as people who are heroes. And so I wanted to build a story that allowed for an abundance of characters from all of those communities to come into play. When I began writing the stories, I was actually just driving to rehearsals. I'm a professional pianist and music director, and I began recording the story as I went along. The centerpiece of the story for me was a character named Della and her brother, who is named Vernon. As an African American woman, I know how often it is that we have to stand up and speak up when no one else will. And so for me, it was really interesting to create a character who was in a position of extreme power, but who really had to work behind the scenes to create a sense of justice. And so that's what Della does for us. Della is essentially my Maxine Waters, if you will. But she's also all of the women and all the women of color in this country that are really speaking up and standing up for what's right when no one else will. Her brother's development, Vernon, who also later is known as Baba, I thought it was important to have an actor and a character from the LGBT community who was, part of everyday society, who was married. He and his husband were planning a very normal life. They were planning to adopt a child. And, as America starts to fall apart, so do their lives. Baba loses the love of his life and he loses his infant daughter. And so as America breaks down, he makes a choice to go and live in the commune. He could have easily remained behind and continued acting like a citizen. But he makes the conscious decision to go there because of who he is. And he makes a conscious decision to keep his commitment to protect children and to educate children, which was part of the work he and his husband Sam were doing, along with Della in the Senate, as they were creating these community schools around the country before the war starts. The production was originally supposed to be performed in November of 2018. We held auditions that summer. We began the casting process, and we just realized that the script was enormous, really too big for the stage. And additionally, like most actors, everyone is trying to work, and so a lot of people bailed on the commitment to the project, and it was just very, very difficult to recast these specialized roles. More importantly, what was happening in the world and what I was seeing on the news, and the fact that it was so closely related to my story, was also very deeply disturbing to me. I wrote many Facebook posts about how I felt like I needed to withhold Homeland from the world because sometimes I felt like I was writing the future, which just sounds ridiculous. But when you're watching the news and you hear the president of the United States saying something that you wrote in a script 8 months ago, and that shouldn't be taking place in this time, in this year, it just created an incredible sense of anxiety for me. And it also just made me a little paranoid about, the possible dangers of publishing a story. And, in this world where people are discriminating against so many of us so regularly, did I want to give even more ideas about what could be? And so I pulled the project and decided to recover, and to delay the performances until the summer, and I wanted to put it in a smaller space. Originally, it was going to be on a pretty large stage at Theater Wit, and I just changed my mind and decided, no, I think I really want this to be in a very intimate space. And Piven Theater was a great choice because not only of my connection to that group, but also just knowing that black box space intimately and having a vision as to how the audience could experience Homeland differently. As I approached this second go around of producing the show, and now having access to more financial resources to really do it justice, the wheels really began turning when it came to thinking about how can I create this really dystopian and futuristic world and make the audience feel like they are in that time. The year for the show is supposedly 2049, so it's the near distant future, if you will. But I wanted the effects of the dismantling of America and this new world to feel even more farther in the future than they are now. I was really excited to bring on Tara Houston as our set designer, Latrice Negron as our lighting designer, and Jessica Sawyer as our costume designer, because I had worked with all three of them on previous projects. Tara and Latrice and I worked together on Five Guys Named Mo in Milwaukee, and Jessica and I have done a number of shows together. I knew that each of their artistic integrities and abilities would only enhance everything that Homeland could be, and they definitely did that justice. Part of keeping with the realness and the integrity of these two split societies also meant that I needed to create a group of outsiders, the people who live in war-torn America, the part of America that is never repaired. I needed to really build this sense of family that happens when you lose everything, right? It doesn't matter if the person is your blood relative or not. You look out for each other, you take care of each other. And in 1078, the boarding house where Vernon, or Baba, now has all of his orphans, there's this real desire to do a lot of physical training and to fight, because you may have to protect yourself at any moment. Some of that fear also comes from the fact that Baba knows that he may be found out one day that he's really not dead, nothing happened to him. He just made a conscious decision to move to this commune and to groom these children this way. So I brought in Andrea Collins to work with the outsiders on all of their movement and martial arts training. It was really important to me that when we see them move and when we see them fight, that it was part of who they were and it was part of each of their characters. I didn't want this to look like it was something that was just staged, but rather that they had been doing it most of their lives. And Andrea did fantastic work with all of the actors involved. Rounding out our production team were um, Nikki Jasper, who was our stage combat choreographer, and also Sophie Sensheimer, who did a lot of our intimacy training. We had people in the cast: Jacob Lill, Tim Vance, Rachel Johnson, who also supported those efforts as we went deeper into rehearsals. Visually, Homeland is very stunning. Um, I have always really loved science fiction and dystopia and otherworld um, genres. And for this production, and because we were in such a closed space, I wanted to make sure that the scenes from Homeland felt like you were looking at a graphic novel or a comic book. And so audience members will notice that there might be one or two characters that have their backs to you, or there may be a character who is greater lit than the other people in the scene, and so, or that there are shadows in places. And so all of this is really to create the look of a graphic novel. The color that Latrice Negron used in this show just makes everything pop. The colors are extremely vivid and really rich. And then Tara Houston's touches of, for instance, using the light cubes, or Jessica's touches of having the cast wear things that were illuminated, really just greatly complemented and enhanced the entire look and made it jump off the page. Jessica is also the person who took all the photos for the show, and you can see in those that they really pop. But most importantly, I always tell the cast, if you wanted to draw little bubbles over people's heads and insert captions like it's a comic book, you could. When I think about the story of Homeland itself, I think it's really easy to assume that it's only related to politics and social justice. But there are several love stories that also happen in Homeland 24, and they are very important love stories. They range from the love of having a child and giving that child away because you know that it's the best decision and that they will be in a safe place, and that in the future they might be able to help you more. There's the love that comes from spending an incredible amount of time with someone and being deeply connected to them at a higher emotional and intellectual level, and even from a level of exchanging energy. And we see that happening with Athe and Nora. We also have a few couples in the play. We've got Nelson and Emily, whose marriage is falling apart, and Nelson and Michael, both who are councilmen that have somehow now started a relationship and fallen in love with each other. And of course, we have the very, very important love story of San and Vernon, and how much it hurts when you lose that partner. And we have the love of Simone and Vivian, which is totally unexpected, but is a very warm welcome to the storyline, because we see that in leaving society, Vivian can finally be who she is. And Simone, who has gone through most of her life being really tough and very guarded, suddenly lets all of those down when she finds her true love in Vivian. Homeland is really a story about taking risks and taking chances. Every scene in the story has a moment when audience members should be asking themselves, what if? And that's really what I want people to walk away with, is this idea of what if those circumstances were different? One of my favorite what if moments is in the scene that's called Simone's Fate, where we see Bill wage violence against Simone in front of the love of her life, Vivian, and we have a character named Andrew present in that room who is struggling with what to do to ensure that no one loses their life. And so when you see the play, you'll understand what I mean by what would have happened if Andrew had just let go of Vivian instead of holding her back. But there are constant moments like that throughout the play. Homeland 24 is really a reflection of what can happen when a nation becomes distracted. And it's very easy for us to get so caught up and so fed up with what is happening politically, and for us to tire from trying to fight, that we don't really think about what the consequences would be after the fact. Sure, we do a lot of work building up toward elections and whatnot, but very few people stop and consider, if we weren't able to change the circumstances, then, what are the aftershocks of those results? And how far could someone in government really go to throw us into what we think of in a creative world as sort of a dystopian world? People have been writing science fiction films and dystopian stories for generations now, but it seems almost terrifying that a lot of the elements that come with dystopia aren't that far away from us. And I think that it's important that we socially make a commitment to not stop the conversation, even when we are absolutely exhausted of talking about politics or talking about what's happening in the Senate and the White House and the government and with individuals. I want to take a moment just to mention and discuss that there is a lot of violence in this show, some which I think people feel is unnecessary, in particular the sexual assault implication scene between Bill and Simone. All of the violence that's in this show, and even the use of firearms, was necessary to me. I remember hating myself the day that I wrote the Simone's Fate scene, and also Vivian's final monologue, because I didn't know if people were going to be able to tolerate that much hurt being portrayed so close to them. But I felt that it was important to show that, and also show the gun violence as a statement of what is happening, what has always happened, and what people often won't prevent from happening. There are a number of times in this story where outsiders are saying, don't shoot. And this is a reflection of police violence against innocent citizens who are being gunned down in this country. The character Raymond was actually supposed to be portrayed by an African American actor, with me having the intention of making a statement about the unnecessary and the very brutal killing and gunning down of black men in this country by policemen and racist people. I wanted to make sure that that was displayed in front of everyone's face, because although there are many of us trying to fight against that mindset, it's still something that our community, our African American community, is constantly being bombarded with. It tears people apart. It takes away lives. It takes away fathers, grandfathers, uncles, and I just wanted to make sure that that element is there. Raymond is being portrayed by an actor who isn't an actor of color, but who I think still brings justice to the role, because he is a character from the LGBT community. And certainly there's also a tremendous amount of unnecessary hate and violence that has been committed against the wonderful people in that community and also in the trans community. So this is why the violence is there. It's something that we can't ignore. It's something that we can't kind of shush people about. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be done away with, and the perpetrators need to be brought to justice. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about the nonverbal language of the outsiders, which in Baba's community, that style is referred to Imle. It's actually a language that I created. I gave the actors pronouns and some verbs and a few adjectives to use, and then let them fill in the blanks for the rest, just in the interest of time. And unfortunately, because of technical issues in our space, we haven't been able to get all the super titles up and projected on the wall yet. But technically, you should never hear these outsiders speak when they're in society. Outsiders lose their freedom of speech in this new world that Henry created for us, which is why they are using this language in signing. So for now, our actors are actually sort of using stage whisper as they're signing, unless they're having conversations with each other in the presence of a citizen, and then we hear them speaking fully. So yeah, that's a little talk about this new original work, Homeland 24. I hope you enjoyed my commentary. More importantly, please tell people to come see the show. The actors are brilliantly talented. Everything is extremely well done. And it's an important story that many people need to hear. It's appropriate for audiences that are probably 14 or older. And we are playing at Piven Theater at the Noise Cultural Arts Center in Evanston through July 14th. The address is 927 Noise Street. You can take the CTA Purple Line to join us, or there's on street and a parking lot with metered parking available. I'm Christie Chiles Twillie. Thank you so much for listening.